Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about something we all feel from time to time. Fear, anxiety, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, we're not cut out for this world. It's that little voice in our head that whispers we're not brave enough, not strong enough. We're going to explore this through a classic story, one that holds a surprisingly powerful lesson for our modern lives. It's the tale of the Hares and the Frogs. Now, if you know anything about hares, you know they're some of the most timid creatures in the animal kingdom. The slightest sound, a rustle in the leaves, a shadow passing overhead, and boom, they're gone in a flash, diving for cover. Their lives are a constant state of high alert, a never-ending cycle of fear. Imagine living like that, where every moment is filled with the potential for panic. It's exhausting just thinking about it, right? Well, for one particular community of hares, this constant anxiety had become too much to bear. They gathered together, their long ears drooping, their noses twitching nervously. One hare, perhaps the oldest and most weary of them all, spoke up. "Friends," he said, his voice trembling, "what kind of life is this? We live in perpetual misery. We can't eat in peace, we can't sleep soundly. The snap of a twig sends our hearts pounding. Is this truly living? I say it's not. I would rather face death once than die 1,000 times every day from fear." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. He was right. The constant stress was unbearable. They felt weak, inadequate, and utterly helpless against the world. Another hare added, "He's right. We are the most miserable of all creatures. No one has it as bad as we do." So they came to a drastic, somber conclusion. They decided to end their misery together. They would find a way to meet death, because any fate seemed better than the life they were living. As they began to discuss the best way to carry out this grim plan, a sudden noise pierced the air. It wasn't loud, just an unexpected sound from nearby. In an instant, their resolution vanished. All their talk of bravery and facing death was forgotten. Instinct took over. In a chaotic scramble of fur and long ears, the entire group of hares bolted. They didn't even know what the noise was, but it didn't matter. They were running, pure and simple, driven by the very fear they had just sworn to escape. Their panicked flight took them towards a large pond. The banks of the pond were green and lush, lined with reeds, and sitting peacefully among them was a large family of frogs. The frogs were just enjoying their day, soaking up the sun, croaking to each other, completely unaware of the approaching stampede. But then they heard it, the thumping of dozens of furry feet getting closer and closer. They saw the frantic shapes of the hares racing towards them. To the frogs, this was a terrifying invasion. These giant, fast-moving creatures were coming right for them. Without a second thought, the frogs did what frogs do when they're scared. With a series of panicked plops and splashes, the entire family leaped from the bank and disappeared into the safety of the muddy water below. In a moment, the once lively pond bank was silent and still. The hares, breathless, finally skidded to a halt at the water's edge. They watched the ripples spread across the surface where the frogs had just been. And then a strange thing happened. The panic began to subside, and a new feeling started to creep in. Surprise. One of the hares, catching his breath, looked at the empty pond bank and then back at his friends. A slow realization dawned on his face. "Wait a minute," he cried out, his voice no longer trembling with fear, but filled with a newfound wonder. "Look, did you see that? Those frogs, they were afraid of us." He pointed a paw towards the pond. "We, who thought ourselves the most pathetic creatures on earth, just terrified an entire family of frogs. They ran from us." The other hares looked at each other. The simple truth of it hit them all at once. They, the timid, perpetually frightened hares, were a source of fear for someone else. The hare who had first suggested they end their lives now looked at his companions with a completely different expression. The despair was gone, replaced by a flicker of hope, maybe even a little bit of pride. "He's right," he said softly. "Perhaps things aren't so bad after all. If there are creatures in this world who are even afraid of us, then we can't be at the very bottom. We're not the most miserable of all." And with that simple realization, their entire perspective shifted. They didn't feel like the weakest creatures anymore. They saw that fear and fortune are all relative. They turned away from the pond, not to go back to their miserable debate about death, but to go back to their warren with a lighter step and a completely new outlook on life. They were still hares, and they would still be timid, but they now understood that they weren't alone in their fear. So what's the big takeaway from this little story? It's a powerful reminder about perspective. It's so easy to get trapped in our own heads, to focus on our own struggles, our own anxieties, and to believe that we have it the worst. We look at our lives and see all the things that scare us, all the ways we feel inadequate, and we can convince ourselves that we're the most unfortunate people on the planet. But the story of the hares shows us that this is almost never the full picture. When we feel overwhelmed, it's a sign that we need to look outside of ourselves. The hares only found their courage when they stopped focusing on their own fear and noticed the fear they caused in others. They realized their position in the world wasn't absolute. It was relative. This is a concept known as downward social comparison. Now that sounds a bit clinical, but it's a very human thing to do. It's not about gloating or taking pleasure in someone else's misfortune. It's about recalibrating our own perspective. It's about recognizing that however bad we think we have it, there is almost always someone somewhere who is facing an even greater challenge. This realization can be incredibly grounding. It can pull us out of a spiral of self-pity and replace it with a sense of gratitude. When we see someone else's struggle, it doesn't diminish our own, but it puts it into context. It can make our own problems seem more manageable. It can inspire a feeling of, if they can handle that, then surely I can handle this. Think about your own life. When you're feeling stressed about a deadline at work, remember there are people who are worried about finding a job at all. When you're frustrated with a small inconvenience, think of those facing major life crises. Again, this isn't to invalidate your feelings. Your stress is real, your frustration is valid. But broadening your perspective can be a powerful tool for managing those emotions. The hares learned that even in their weakness, they possessed a form of strength. They had the power to startle the frogs. In the same way, we all have strengths we may not even recognize. When we're stuck in a cycle of negative self-talk, we become blind to our own capabilities. We think we're just the hares, forgetting that to someone else we might look like a force to be reckoned with. So the next time you feel like the hares, when you feel like life is just too much and you are the most miserable person in the world, try this. Take a moment. Breathe, and then look around. Look for the frogs. Not to scare them, of course, but to remind yourself that everything is relative. Practice gratitude for what you have. Offer a helping hand to someone who might be struggling more than you are. In doing so, you might just discover a strength and courage you never knew you possessed. You'll find that your problems, while still real, don't have to define your entire existence. Just like the hares, we can choose to turn away from the pond of despair and walk back towards our lives with a new, more hopeful perspective. Things may not be perfect, but maybe, just maybe, they're not so bad after all. Thank you so much for joining me today for this story and reflection. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content that helps us navigate life with a little more wisdom and a little less fear. Let me know in the comments what you think. Have you ever had a frog moment that changed your perspective? I'd love to hear about it. Until next time, take care.